In 2014, artist Scott Noel organized a show at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts of artists who paint from life. One of my favorites was Michael Ananian. A few months ago, when Scott curated a show at Philadelphia's Stanek Gallery, I finally got to meet him.
Hi, I'm Mike Ananian, and I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, and this is one of my paintings right here. Let's see, where to begin?
Well, I know where to begin. Armenia.
Armenia. Well, I'm half Armenian, obviously on my father's side, and the other half is good old Downeasterner Yankee, born and raised in northern Massachusetts, schooled there, but I've been living for about 24 years in Greensboro, North Carolina. I teach at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Well, I've just been painting my entire life, primarily in oil, but with a couple of detours, making narrative sequences in Casein, consisting of anywhere from about 12 to 17 paintings that tell a story, a personal narrative, as opposed to a scene from the Bible or something like that. I've always had an interest in narrative painting, and it's carried into my most recent work. Single images, not sequences anymore, and they dovetail into my own life too, because they're about old-time music from the Piedmont, that part of North Carolina I live in. I also happen to play. I took up clawhammer banjo almost 4 years ago. I'm smitten with it. I love the history of the music, of the banjo. Now I'm painting about that. It's been an awful lot of fun.
Do you play with other people?
Yeah, I do. Plenty of people to jam with. And the university has an old-time group in the music school. I'm a part of that too. I also have an interest in portraiture.
Mike is back in North Carolina, but I talked to him by phone about his life and work. I asked Mike about why he is so devoted to perceptual painting, which means painting what you see in front of you, as opposed to using photographic reference or working from your head.
It just seems so much more authentic to me to get it right from the source. I have a clearer sense of the dimensionality of the object or the person's head or the person's body.
Mike thinks there's a certain quality that is lacking in paintings done from photographs.
There's just something about it that the connection doesn't feel as what we perceptual artists call as felt. Almost like you felt the form and connected on that tactile level with what you're painting. I have included all the nuances of color and light. I often like to amplify the warm-cool relationships of color. There's the cool light from the window, northern light coming in from the left, and on the right is an incandescent bulb. Cool blue light collides with the warmish interior light of the incandescent to produce this zone of hues that amplify each other, heightens the sense of volume of the structure that you're painting. Where the collision is, this intermediary zone, you get all these different colors that come about so unexpectedly. There's no way I could have invented something like that. So for me, perception is a fantastic way to go.
Mike told me his love of direct observation has roots in his childhood.
I was a Boy Scout, and obviously I enjoyed it a lot, and because I became an Eagle Scout. We did a lot of backpacking, and we were out in the wild a lot. And so I think it was, for me, something that's connected to perceptual painting, connecting with nature and being very much in awe of its beauty and diversity.
What makes Mike's paintings so special to me is how he builds psychologically intense imagery using a very intense painterly attack.
Other painters describe me as a gritty realist, expressive realist, or a painterly realist. I seek description and nuance of form, but I also love bold, vigorous paint handling and execution. My painting surfaces are scarred, rubbed, scratched, built, destroyed, and rebuilt. I want my rough and raw treatment of paint and form to echo the visceral reactions and mental states of the people depicted, with the end result being a fusion between the visual and psychological elements. I also wanted to mention my private art lessons with Leslie Swank, who was a commercial artist and lived nearby in a town called Salem, New Hampshire. One of the things that he taught me to do, without even really having to lecture about it, was the importance of energy, vitality, and boldness in my mark making and my execution and conception of form. I feel a debt of gratitude toward him. He was just the best guy, very important in my high school years. I went to Rhode Island School of Design, was in the illustration department there, because I thought I could use drawing and painting to make some money. I pretty early on realized that I just wanted to be a painter. I wasn't really interested in creating imagery for other people, my ideas being placed in the back seat.
But Mike didn't switch to the painting department because many of the faculty were the same, plus there was more of an emphasis on painting and drawing from life in the illustration department.
So I stayed where I was and had a really terrific education as to how to observe objects and paint from life and roll with changes that come along when you work from life and see them as opportunities rather than obstacles. Then I went on to grad school, Yale. Yale had a vibrant program in figuration as well as abstraction. And I think at Yale, I really started to understand and appreciate the richness of composition. RISD taught me a lot about working from perception, but Yale taught me much about abstract elements and devices to make an engaging, visually exciting composition. And my chief mentors were Bernard Chait, John Hull, and William Bailey. Bernie for the importance of light in painting. Bailey wanted students to pay attention to the whole composition, every square inch of it. And Bailey himself was one of the most thorough painters. And then John Hull created really fascinating narratives. John, I think, is probably the most significant one because he turned me on to the possibilities of narrative painting.
Mike believes his approach to music is not so different from his approach to art. He said perceptual painting
seems to have an oral counterpart in old-time musical traditions of learning and transmitting music by ear, a direct sound experience in real time and unmitigated by an intermediary medium such as sheet music, in which one uses sight to get to sound. Banjo Roustabout is the first painting that I have termed my old-time series. I just started playing the banjo and I was very enthusiastic about it. One of my favorite songs is called Banjo Roustabout. It's about a guy who's a rounder, that is kind of a wise guy and an ne'er-do-well. So the painting's about me playing that character a little bit, and my cat, who is very much a roustabout. So, banging and sawing, quintessential pairing of old-time instruments and traditions. duets between fiddles and banjos. And I sometimes like to put figures against an open window. I'm very inspired by Scott Noel's paintings, in which he places figures that are almost silhouetted against this panoramic view of downtown Philadelphia. But I wanted to somewhat mask it with the blinds.
Mike also pointed out that the repetitive pattern of window blinds relates to musical rhythm.
Communitas is about me connecting with banjo history. Most people think that banjo is a white southern instrument, when in reality it's an African Caribbean invention, carried to the United States, considered a slave instrument. It wasn't until the 1830s that European Americans became interested. They were musicians who came out of Boston and New York. Turkey in the Straw, another large painting. It's about a tune that I really love. So I've started a series within this series of songs that I like, that are part of my repertoire, do a little bit of research into them, and paint about them in this particular image based upon a story by an old-time fiddler and banjoist out of West Virginia, Burl Hammonds. The skeleton figures prominently in his story, very quirky.
A few more of Mike's paintings based on songs were at the Stanek Gallery show. The painting Golden Slippers was titled after a song written by an African-American composer named James Bland. Mike first heard the song as a kid when it was used as a jingle for Golden Graham cereal. He feels that the legacy of James Bland, who wrote hundreds of songs performed for Queen Victoria but died penniless, should be more widely known. I pointed out to Mike that I see a lot of drinking going on in his work.
You are right on the money. I do have some alcoholic-looking characters, it's true, and I like to take a whiskey now and then myself. The only song that I can sing, the painting, the message is different. It's not moonshine, it's not even bourbon, it's Johnnie Walker Black. I'm saying that what used to be old-time music, poor working class people in the mountains, is no longer that at all. It's actually quite middle class cultural activity. Johnnie Walker Black symbolizes that. By the way, there are 5 glasses and only 4 people playing, so the 5th glass I sort of see as an invitation for the viewer to join in.
I'd love to.
People come from different walks of life who play this music now, and not just from the mountain poor. The other guys in the painting, I'll reveal the secret, are the same guy. And I put different hats on their heads and different clothes.
On Mike's website, I found a bunch of really terrific drawings.
I do draw quite a bit. I use drawing to work out ideas for paintings, compositions. Many of the drawings I've made of individual musicians ended up being poses that I use in my musical painting. I might transfer directly to a painting through a grid transfer, or I might just copy loosely onto the painting. The medium and the technique, well, they're pretty much from perception, and the medium's quite simple. It's charcoal pencil. I use 4Bs. My favorite eraser is a pink pearl eraser because you can push around the charcoal like it's paint and get various tonalities to boot and swatches of value. They take about maybe 3 hours. They usually don't take nearly as long as my paintings do. There's something more spontaneous, I think, refreshing about making drawings. Many of the drawings I've made have been from the model in my classes. I periodically draw with the students. and I think they get a real kick from it. They just learn by looking, and so I figure that's a great thing to do, and I've made a number of drawings that I really like in the classrooms. They're all pretty much 18 by 24 inches, which is a standard format for drawing paper. In some cases, the forms are a little distorted, in some they're quite accurate. I just feel like I can let it all hang out in the drawing. It reveals my thinking at that moment, my emotional state. I think they're important reminders of what I can do in a painting.
So far, we have mainly looked at Mike's more recent work, which are oil paintings. But over the years, he has painted a number of narrative images on paper using Casein, which is a milk-based, water-soluble paint that dries quickly. He distinguishes between narrative series and narrative sequences, and believes the latter are more effective in communicating personal stories not already known to the viewer.
I have always worked serially. I get the feeling that most artists do this. They have a range of questions, so they revisit particular themes. I was doing this, but I wanted something more, something else. Starting to time order a series into a particular order of events, I thought would be very satisfying to do, and thus the series turned into a sequence of images. So I thought, well, here's the way to tell a story, especially if it's a story that no one's familiar with. How do I structure such a thing? Do I just follow a chronological, or can I get more fancy with the time ordering? You have individual compositions, and then you have a larger composition of the entire sequence in which certain parts can frame other parts. One part can mirror and be the opposite of what I did earlier. Many of my sequences have leitmotifs that consist of doubling and opposites. I've always had an interest in twins. Growing up, my brother and I worked in a grocery store, and we are about 2 years apart, but everybody called us the Ananian twins. I guess we were a lot alike in our mannerisms, and we're indistinguishable on the telephone. Even our mom sometimes has trouble. Doppelganger literature has to do with mirroring, and my latest sequence explores just that. Last four paintings are a reflection of the first four, and they frame otherworldly, out-of-time sequence in the middle.
The first four and the last four paintings of Counterpoint are realistic. They shift both perspective and point of view between the protagonist and the narrator. These two sections surround the bizarre and supernatural middle section of 9 paintings, which depict the slow and sinister takeover of a character by his doppelganger. I find Counterpoint to be Mike's most psychologically intense work. It has an almost nightmarish quality. I bet Rod Serling, like me, would have loved it. Mike sent me an email about his narrative sequences. He said he's been inspired by films, comic books, as well as earlier traditions in art going back to before the Renaissance. He wrote, 2 voices uses a split-screen composition for each painting. As a result, the viewer can watch 2 different narratives happening simultaneously, a man on one side, a woman on the other. The split-screen motif suggests that they are in separate buildings and places. They could be in distant lands that are in different time zones. They are separated physically, but are connected psychologically through technology, and they are trying to connect physically through meeting each other. I use a wave to separate the sides. It becomes more and more complicated in each painting. I hope the wave reminds one of a telephone wire, cord, or sound wave. The wave functions as a measure or barometer and indicates that the man and the woman are connected by common emotions and desires, although they could be separated by hundreds of miles. The story begins with the man and the woman still in bed, in the painting, asleep. It seems they are thinking or dreaming, perhaps fantasizing about each other. In beauty and splendor, they are both up, and of course the first thing they do, even before dressing or having coffee, is check their email. In the next scene, the two versions of the phone is ringing. He is making a mad dash to the phone, and on the way, he spills some coffee. The man has reached the phone and talking, and chats while he cleans up the spill. The conversation continues in conversing, but he seems to be doing all of the talking. Shows post-conversational rumination. They slowly prepare to meet each other in getting ready, mirror, mirror, and carpet. He departs from home in leaving. They meet in arriving, and I end the story here. I consider these 12 paintings my little book of hours, where I have tried to knit the daily routines of people's lives with their most fundamental concerns. All those things that people hope to find in their pursuit of happiness. Expectations and Desires chronicles the lives of two men in the workplace of the dot-com era. The rise to success of an industrious employee and the dissolution and failure of the other worker. These two men may be brothers, twins, or two aspects of one personality. They are distinguishable from one another by their clothes and necktie, which remain the same throughout the sequence. The one fellow's desires match society's social norms. The other guy is wild and struggles to balance his own desires against society's expectations. Hogarth's industry and idleness have been a leitmotif for my paintings. Hogarth's moral censure was clear. However, I am less judgmental. Indeed, my characters seem unaware of the contradictions within themselves. The chronology begins with the duo's introduction in Welcome. They then graduate from college in Graduating with the Art Students and enter the working world in Break Time. The next three paintings depict parties. Garden Party is a civilized party. Happy Hour and Too Much Fun are wild parties. On the Job and Asked to Quit show the results of idleness. Working hard and working smart contrasts the protagonist's approaches to romance. Romance is no longer an issue in Valentine's Day and domestic tranquility. Dreamer is wistful and contemplative. Partner and Hard Times depict the consequences of our fellows' choices. In weaving this multi-layered serial morality tale in paint, I have tried to portray with satire and humor the struggle to reconcile our desires with society's expectations. I hope that I have, as Tom Wolfe puts it, painted the carnival of life of our times. I asked Mike what he thought of these guys. He said, "I have big problems with both characters, but I have fewer ones with the wastrel. He at least has some sensitivity and appreciates and strives for beauty, as indicated by the musical instruments that surround him in several scenes." Maybe that's why he's the one who gets to take a bow at the end. And if it were up to me, this remarkable painter would be taking a bow as well.
I hope everything they do, the texture, the thick paint, the energy of the mark making, and the color, create something that's vivid.